Hello and welcome to our Saturday Live. Thank you for joining us for the session, and of course to PR Moment for partnering with us for the session. And a big shout out to our content curator, Sonali and Pooja, for putting the sessions together. Today, we take up a tricky subject, emotional quotient in PR. What does it mean when a journalist cribs about an insensitive pitch made by PR? How do you handle the backlash? This when the client on the other end also expects you to deliver the story on this trending topic. When you thought you had a slam dunk, the journalist obviously disagrees. What is your pitch missing? Is EQ the missing ingredient? Can you include or learn EQ? How can you encourage that in your team? Lots of questions. And today, in an attempt to answer these and more, Dr. John Victor and Paarul Chand. So before I add them on, let me introduce our panelists to you. Dr. John Victor is a clinical psychologist and the CEO of Solace, known as John Sir, for his vast experience in conducting experiential learning workshops and understanding his students. His therapeutic relationship with the students is like you looking into a mirror, and he assists people in finding various perspectives affecting life at the moment. He has worked with some of the top companies globally. His 10 days long training course of Counselling Skills is one of the best in terms of training students to learn how to commence, conduct, and end therapy sessions. So welcome, John.
Hi. Hi, everyone.
And I'll also take a moment to introduce a second panelist for today, though she needs no introduction to the PR community, but I will still attempt one. Paarul Chand, editor-in-chief and partner PR Moment of India's leading online PR magazine. For those who don't know her, Paarul is probably the loveliest media person who writes on PR that you will deal with. Along with her duties at PR Moment, she's also part of the new Masters Media Course Committee for the Indian Institute of Mass Communication to be introduced in the summer of 2020 and takes up guest lectures for the Institute's postgraduate advertising and PR course. An IIMC alumni, Paarul started her career as a TV journalist in '93, reporting news with prestigious channels including BBC, CNBC, Dow Jones, and Economic Times TV, post which she switched careers and joined as a PR strategist for public health and social development. So without much ado, let me add her on. Hi, Paarul.
Hi, guys. Very happy to be here on this Saturday morning. Hope you're enjoying your weekend.
Yeah. So how have you been?
It's been a fantastic couple of 4-5 months. Good. Feel fortunate to have work, and it's really good that work is going on. I think in this day and age, that's something we should be all grateful for.
Correct. So true. So let's start the subject, start the discussion, because I believe this is something that a lot of our PR community members are waiting for. So let's start with you, Dr. John. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and your brush with the world of communication. And could you define EQ for our audiences before we delve into it?
Right. First, let's discuss about what is EQ. And
Right.
it's, the concept of EQ is there in the world for a very long time. And Daniel Goleman wrote an amazing kind of book about emotional intelligence as well. And a lot of people talk about emotional quotient, but in reality, not many people are actually able to use it to the fullest extent. Only some of the people who are trained, or some people who have knack of, probably they learn things from their parents or they learn from their experiences. They're able to use that emotions very well, because emotional quotient is, to simplify that, it's like, having an ability to understand and manage emotional encounters. Now, when we say that ability and understand the emotional encounters, if you have to understand that, first you need to have knowledge of your emotions. Not just, look, I'm angry, I'm upset, I'm happy, not just this, but in depth. Why? What is the reason that you're actually angry with? And what is making you to get upset? And what is the meaning you are actually giving? What is the perspective you're actually taking from that situation? These all are actually learned behaviors. Once you have this understanding, then you will be able to, handle your emotions. Anybody who is not able to handle their emotions, they definitely will not be able to handle emotions of other people. If you're not able to handle other people's emotions, That means you're going to have problems in terms of your relationships. You'll have problems in terms of your performance and your work-related, activities. And overall, that even can actually make the person unhappy as well, right? And something is very interesting to understand here, to elaborate a little bit more in a common kind of sense. It's like being objectively sensitive towards your own self is emotional intelligence. And at the same time, having the same objectively sensitive towards other people is empathy. It's a very beautiful kind of thought process. Objectively sensitive towards self. Is it really possible for human beings? That means you have to be objectively sensitive towards yourself. The same thing you're actually showing that to other people, that is empathy. Right? So this is primarily, like, by definition, by understanding there's a small interaction in terms of emotional intelligence and emotional quotient. Yes, of course, if you ask me about my grasp with communications, yes, being a therapist, I'm not that much good in terms of talking and having a conversation, because I need to learn a lot of language. I need to speak correct language. Even to convey what you're actually feeling, what you're thinking, what you want to convey. It's one of the most important thing is having that communication skill. Just having the communication skill is also not is going to help you. You need to have that empathetic understanding of understanding the person, what the person is going through, and seeing and observing what the person is not communicating also. That means, of course, we listen to a lot of people what they're talking. I mean, you already know people who talk about communication, train communication skills. They tell 30-40% is only the words, and 60-70% is the body language.
Correct.
So I heavily give a lot of importance to everything what the person is talking and what the person is not talking but conveying as well. So my brush with this communication actually came almost 20 years back. And I trained myself in terms of, getting into some medical school and, learn things and how to understand, and read a lot about, human behavior, human emotions, observed from, Paarul is actually talking about, parenting earlier before we actually started this. I mean, I actually been forced to learn about how animals deal with their kids, how they train their children. So I had to, because to train parents in normal human beings, I had to actually spend more time in understanding about how animals train their children. And that actually gives amazing kind of insights how we parent our children. From there onwards, I learned to be communicating. And communicating is not just only telling the words. You have to make the other partner or the person to understand 100% what is that you want to convey. If you fail to convey that 100%, probably the other person is going to get something else rather than what you actually want him to understand. So it's very important for you to understand what you want to speak, and also it's your responsibility to make the other person also to get what you intend to make the person understand. So if you're able to manage this thing, I think you'll be able to communicate pretty well.
That's interesting that you draw a comparison between pet parents and humans as such, because I think Paarul and me both are pet parents. And at some point of time, there are a lot of similarities that we draw between human children's and our four-legged children's as well. So I'll move the conversation along with addressing a question to Paarul. Paarul, now that John has set a context for us on what EQ is, what is your perspective on how EQ fits into a mad and possibly madder PR world?
Yeah. So firstly, thank you, Tarun, for curating these wonderful conversations. And at PR Moment, I'm really pleased to partner with you on this. So thank you. Firstly, I think taking the context of what John has talked about, empathy. What happens when you're pitching stories which are trend worthy? It's very easy to get carried away by what. There's an echo coming, right, from somewhere. Can't make out. Is there an echo? You can hear an echo?
No.
No. Okay. So it's fine. Okay. So it's very easy to get carried away with what the client is telling us, and what and you have to deliver that story on your Excel sheet. You have to make sure your category A, category B, category C media is done. So it's very easy to get carried away. But if you fail to project that story in a sensitive manner, and in my mind, in PR, sensitivity entails that when you look at topics like COVID, when you look at topics like mental health, it's important to put the issue first and not the brand first. That, I think, is the biggest sign of being empathetic when you're doing actual PR work out there in the field. The moment you start pushing the brand first is when the media gets extremely upset, and that you have the kind of reactions you had with Mrs. Kumara Mangalam, which of course is another story altogether. But that's when you start having these kind of reactions. The other place of empathy is actually with your clients. So what happens? What I've observed from meeting so many nice young PR professionals in the last 7 years is that a lot of these professionals are women, and maybe young women. So women in India are kind of conditioned not to push back and not to express the emotions in a way which is using that emotion to solve the business problem. Right. And rather than doing that, what they do is that they listen, keep quiet, and then go and deliver what they think they can deliver. But what happens at that point is the client feels that you have understood and you will deliver. But actually, you are not able to deliver that for many reasons. So there's a mismatch, expectation mismatch, which leads to frustration, emotions of wrong expectations, and also further, stress for the young person who's trying to do this. So I think and also somewhere we have to understand the empathetic towards the business priorities of the client. If you look at the business priorities of the client from an empathetic point of view, then you'll be able to understand why he's doing the branding. Because what happens to the PR professional is that two conflicting, equally powerful forces are emotionally pulling you for their priorities. The journalist at one end and the brand at the other end. So you are actually, like a counselor like John, has to combine the two and come up with an empathetic way to approach both of them. So, but I would say push the issue first when it comes to sensitive issues, and we'll talk later about it. But there are specific stakeholder ways of interaction when you're interacting with health topics, which we'll talk about later, consent forms, and we'll get into all that later. I hope that answers some of it.
Understand. PR is no less stressful. I think it's one of the most stressful jobs in the world from the last stat report that came out. You're right. You as PR professionals, we are right in the middle of it, and there are two very powerful forces that are pulling us in both directions. And in today's day and age, when job security is at risk, when clients' security is at risk for that matter, the pressure is phenomenal. For a young PR professional to be able to deliver a story on one end, and however much EQ we talk about empathy, we talk about mental wellness, it's very difficult for them to be able to show that to their own people. And that's where the disconnect happens, I believe. The case that you were mentioning about a very powerful person on Twitter who dropped her agency and who happened to be in the mental wellness space, but dropped her agency online, on Twitter, in full view of everyone, for making an insensitive pitch. Now, here is where there is a huge disconnect in terms of perception. You are in the mental wellness space, and charity begins at home. So why is it not that PR professionals who are working with you or employees who are working with you are not benefited by it? Here is also where I think a lot of PR professionals get that disconnect, because they know that the client is possibly only doing this for PR. Yeah, that is where there is a lack of authenticity that comes in. And that is where I think a lack of conviction in what the client is actually proposing out there comes in. And this shows through in the PR pitches that we are pushing out. It doesn't matter to them whether it's sensitive, not sensitive, whether it's relevant, not irrelevant, because on one end, the client would be pushing them and telling them, coverage kidhar hai? How many stories have you delivered today? And that is where it all falls flat. Yeah, I want to understand from you, both of you, for that matter, when it comes to a situation like this, yeah, where a client or a journalist takes to, earlier it used to be a nasty phone call or a very nasty email, right? But now when it's come to a situation where they are looking at Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram, or Twitter for that matter, where they're using these public platforms to belight and condescend, various PR professionals, naming and shaming them as such. I don't think it's a very healthy practice. I want to understand from you what would you advise to the PR professional out there? While we are in a little bit of a bubble where we all feel, oh, somebody has wronged us, right? And all the journalists are like that, all the clients are like that. But you're right, at some point of time, we have to learn how to push back, right? What would be your advice in situations like this, and how does one push back?
Taranjit, one thing we need to understand here. Yes, of course, PR is one of the top 5 professions in the world which actually have severe amount of stress.
Right.
And that is not just self-made. It's because it's you said that it's a 2-dimensional. One is the agencies and the other one is your clients. If you really see, it's a multi-dimensional kind of stress situation. How it happens, one PR agency comes and say, okay, we're going to do this. And they tell we're going to get 10 articles. And now other agencies comes and say, we want to get this account. So they propose, we'll do 15 articles for you. Now, a dog eats dog kind of business where you're competing not just with clients' time and money, but you're also competing with your colleagues. No, you're actually pushing yourself too much more than what you can deliver. Now, there's a rat race. Everybody wants to get that pie. Right. Because, if you really see, yes, of course, growth is not that much compared to other professions. If you really look at it, especially in PR. It's slow and steady, but it's growing in its own way. I think it's much better than in earlier days. It's picking up now. Now, you see a lot of juniors, a lot of young people who come from mass comm and other PR agencies. They start their own businesses and they want to work very well. And the top companies are already there. They get their work. And they actually decide and tell, what, they talk to their clients, we can do only if they ask about 10 interviews. The top company say, no, we can get you 5 interviews. Now, immediately, stress will become half of top companies. And uske niche jo companies hai, they're struck with less number of clients and more amount of work. And they have to prove themselves again and again to deliver that. So they're actually over-delivering. And promising and try to over-deliver. Now, as a PR professional, tell me one thing very clearly. Isn't it that very well in this kind of amount of money or amount of time, do you really think that you'll be able to deliver what you're promising? Without stretching yourself?
No, see, end of the day, it depends on the leadership of the, agency or the individual who's working out there to decide what is the limit.
Exactly. Yeah? Now, once again, I got your answer. Now, if you really look at that, the leadership things, you're doing okay, but you can do better. You need to do even 4 steps further. Now, leadership, no, 10 people can stretch this year. Now, we need to stretch the envelope. This is a concept which is actually going in leadership circle. We need to stretch that, couple of more steps. In the process of stretching, we are compromising not just the company, the leadership, but your best employees. You're pushing them to the best, and you're actually making them to commit more than what they can deliver. That's why you see PR people work more than 12 hours a day, if I'm not wrong. Because I know I'm working with some of the clients who are in the PR industry, but they work so much, and their sleep is less, and they struggle. They're not having good relationships, and they drink as well. They have all other things. I'm not blaming the leadership here. That's the kind of situation is actually happening. Now, if you really want to deal with that, you need to take care of yourself. You understand about your boundaries, where you can put a limit, how much you can stretch. So once you're able to handle those things, probably you'll actually help yourself and you'll also help the company. Probably Baki, whatever the rest, which I missed out in related to PR, Probably Paarul is going to help you out.
Okay, so before that, I'd like to kind of address that point when you mentioned leadership teams, etc. See, PR is a very competitive field.
Yes.
Yeah, it's cutthroat competition at many levels, and more than ever, it's like it's really critical for everybody to do that little bit extra, go that extra mile, right? While a lot of leadership teams are pushing out there, but it also depends on the professional who's working, right? It's a classic case. Most of the professionals who succeed in this industry are self-starters, right? And I'm going to give you my example because I have been accused of this, of over-delivering on clients, right? I have been accused of not listening to the leadership team when they have set an agenda, and because I felt that I could do more and just a little more, right? Till it became an issue for the company as well. I had very good mentors who told me that, this is not the way to live your life. You need to have a balance. But to a young, aggressive, ambitious professional, it didn't really matter at that point of time. I think this also comes with a lot of emotional maturity as you grow in your profession, as you grow in life. I think that is when that balance comes in. You realize that there is a need for balance. I remember the first time one of my mentors turned around and told me that, what are you doing, right? Go and have a life. Go get a life beyond work, because I was working 16, 17 hours a day and I had no idea what was outside. My response to that question was to turn around and ask, what is life?
This is life.
This is life for me, right? Yeah. I think it has to, both ends have to understand that, and this only comes. I can only talk about my example, and I'm sure there are others in the industry who might resonate with that. It has to come from both ends. Paarul, would you want to weigh in on that?
I think probably I'll add a little bit more before Paarul steps in here. Yes, what you said is I completely agree. Most of the youngsters who comes into the business, they work like that. You know why? It has to come from within.
Sorry, one sec.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, I couldn't switch it off. Sorry.
They have to prove to themselves, the first thing, and they have to prove to the bosses, and they have to prove to their colleagues. So they actually, because young people come there, they don't have responsibilities, there's nothing. They put in so much of effort. Now you actually put the bar here on the top. Now to reach the bar, rest of the life you'll be struggling. Don't push the bar like that. Have the bar, but you, at the same time try to understand how much your body, your mind, your lifestyle can permit you. You need to keep assessing that on a regular basis and keep that bar moving up and down where and when it's required. But are we doing this?
Is that what we call the foolishness of the youth?
I'll not say it's foolish, because it's a hard work. They actually want to stabilize, because they want to make sure that their life and their work is stable. For that, they work so hard. I don't say it's foolishness, but after some time, when you realize that, when your body is giving up, when you don't listen to your body, when you don't listen to your emotions, then the same thing actually, that's strength once upon a time, that's turned out to be foolishness or weakness later.
Correct. Paarul, you had something to add to this point.
Yes, I think firstly I fully agree with what John and you both are saying on this issue. Both of you have points to offer, but what we've been observing is that there is a huge disconnect between the deliverables that are being promised and between what is possible, especially in the post-COVID era. So there seems to be almost a blind optimism going forward, pushing forward the same deliverables of media, knowing very well that they can't happen. So this is causing a lot of stress and emotional problems. So I think what John has said, that you must draw a line, is even more important now, because you will fail to deliver on those things. Secondly, I think some of those deliverables can only be done by the top leadership, but they are actually being made to do to the younger people who do not have the skill set or the emotional bandwidth or the professional bandwidth to push those kind of deliverables. So
Right.
I think you have to calibrate the deliverables. This is, of course, a long term. It's easy for me to sit here and say that, but the fact is that a lot of the PR plans are drawn from the point of view of the leadership and not in point of view from the people who actually have to deliver it. So that is a very big emotional lack of empathy of the leadership, I would say. Sorry, Tarun, but there is a little bit of a lack of empathy among the PR leadership towards, their employees. And that's not unique to PR. I would not say that's unique to PR. That's unique to many, many sectors. And currently that tendency has become heightened because of COVID, because the deliverables are so stretched, and PR being not being sort of considered a priority business activity, it becomes even more difficult for the leadership to get the client to stay on. So you get forced to offer more deliverables. But in India, it's a very peculiar feudal kind of problem, and I would to some extent, yes, it comes with experience, but it also comes with your personality. If
Correct.
you are a young man, he will not be so cowed down than a young woman. I mean, I've seen this, with so many people. So it's a bit of a feudal indoctrination also. Why we agree to these deliverables? Because we are used to listening to the Bade Papa. So we will agree. We will sort of, this is a term which John uses, but it's very apt. We do listen to the Bade Papa and say, okay, sir, whatever we may not say sir, we may say, Raman or whatever, but we will agree. Finally, we'll agree to whatever they're saying. And I'm not going to name the person, but because he's very, very senior in the PR business. And I heard this second or third hand that he took on a huge client who was in a crisis communication, and he told the client that I can promise you one thing, that whenever the stories are being written about you, your point of view will be taken. Now, this is a very, very senior person. And I was so impressed that in a crisis, the tendency of a PR person is to say that, sir, only your narrative will happen. But he did not say that. He said, even if it's a negative story, I will ensure that I take a quote from you. He did not talk about changing the narrative. So this is the kind of empathetic understanding he had, and he did not overpromise. So I just want to share this.
So that's perfectly fine. And see, there is no apology needed on that. Leadership teams are equally responsible. But I have been in agencies where, you were just given the plan after the pitch process is approved and everything. You're just given the plan and said deliver, right? And you're sitting there and figuring out how do I start? Where do I start? What does this even mean, right? The PR strategy and approach absolutely made no sense to me. And that is where you end up working from 7 in the morning to 3 in the night, and get into that rigmarole of a very, very nasty, unhealthy lifestyle, right? When I started my agency, I would say it took me some time to understand that. I was always a one-woman army, right? But learning to grow from there is one of the biggest learnings that one does, right? And thankfully for us, I try and make sure that the team is as involved in it as I am, right? Nothing can happen without, the delivery as such. And that is equally important. Though it makes a lot of sense for, the teams also to be equally involved in something like this, and especially when new business is concerned. And you're right, when you talk about men versus women, I think that's a very, very apt definition, apt example to give given our cultural setting. And for me as well, I've been in the industry now for almost 20 years. I think it's only in the last 3 or 4 years that I've learned to make sure that I recognize this pattern and learn how to break it. And that did come about with Maushmi being introduced to my life. Maushmi, that is somebody that all of us know very well. Yeah, she introduced and helped me recognize this pattern and break it. So it doesn't matter which stage of your career you are at or how senior you are, unless you recognize this pattern and learn to break it, I think there's no progress that can be made. You'll keep repeating the same mistake over and over again. Though we do have a lot of questions pouring in, and stuff that we started our conversation with, I think still people want us to answer that. When we spoke about, people dissing PR on social media platforms, what would be your best advice on pushing back? How does one respond to it? We are often told by a lot of our leadership teams to ignore it. Rehne do, muh mat lago. That kind of stuff which always happens. But I don't think that's a healthy practice.
Yeah, it's a beautiful way of telling ignore it. Because it's not happening to you. It's happening to the person who's directly involved. So
Right.
for you have 10 employees, 20 employees. If one goes, other person will come. But for them, they have only one life, right? If somebody trying to target you and tell you, try to demean you, then look at how it's going to affect your entire psyche. Unfortunately, what is happening currently, in olden days, people have time and energy to listen to you, to understand your perspective. Today, people don't have that much of time.
Right.
Because they think that everybody, even the people who doesn't even understand about a lot of things, looking at couple of courses or probably one day or something on the Facebook, they say, or they know everything about how India and China go to war. Right. They actually have their own judgments on everything. And in spite, they don't do anything. They don't even contribute one single rupee for, taxes in the country. But they have comments on everything and everybody. And people also are so insensitive. Small thing happen, they want to share to the world and they want to unko badas nikalne hai. So because why? The parents also treated them like that, like Rajas, Maharajas. And if they are not happy, parents will come, "ठीक है बेटा, हम adjust करेंगे." You have this kind of attitude. If somebody comes and talks to you, you're not able to deliver, probably you didn't understand the person, or that person does not understand. They feel you're wrong to them. They feel you do not have any right, and they feel that they have right to put you down and talk nonsense about you. And what they do, they don't even come to you and ask you, well, Paranjit, what is actually happening? I want to understand before I take an action. I want to really look at that. Is this what you said? Is this what you're doing? They don't have time because they become trigger happy. They just want to go and put all that kind of muck and critical kind of thing and on the Facebook or on the social media, and then they'll wait for somebody to respond. Whenever somebody responds supporting that, they feel it's like a kind of orgasm, literally, and they get that kind of kick again and again. And if you see, these are few little individuals. They not only do with you, they do with everybody around. They basically become critical kind of beings. But generally, if you actually want to deal with this kind of person, always try to have personal relationship with people whom you're working with. Talk to them and understand them. And also, before the person is going, make sure the person understood everything what you're conveying. Right? Because they're paying you money and you promised like 10 articles, so you have to do 10 articles. If you do 9 articles and they do very well, one article you miss because the time is not, or whatever it may be. For that one article, they can actually create a lot of problem for you. So have communication, explain, and help them. Ask them, okay, what else I can do? How else I can do? Okay, this I come up with a lot of things. Sometimes some patients book an appointment on our portal, and some of our therapists doesn't do the sessions because they didn't get message or whatever it may be. Now the person will write an email to me that this website is very bad website, this is very not good. I mean, they show so much. Then I will say very clearly, my sincere apology. I understand your anguish. What is that I can do for you? I have a conversation with them. Trust me, after the first conversation, they become calm and they'll have a next session with the same doctor as well. Right? That means anytime if you understand, if you can also anticipate this person is going to do something like that, you can see that person, see through them. So have a conversation with them, but don't allow them to go away with a smile. If they go away with a smile, yeah, go ahead.
See, this works when you have, let's say, it's an employee situation, right? What happens when a lot of times PR guys are caught unawares and they're caught off guard when somebody randomly posts up on Twitter and starts targeting them, right? In such situations, we've had industry bodies also respond to it. And, but the more attention you give them, it fuels that conversation, right? More and more they want, like you said, it validates their feelings and it gives them a euphoric high and they want that kind of attention. But ignoring it is not an option. not ignoring it is also not an option, right?
Well, here, if that person is related to you, you have some kind of conversation connect. Then you have to like connect to the person. If a random guy actually says something, a random kind of thing, for that you don't have to respond. You keep doing your work and keep moving ahead in the right direction. Random people, you don't have to respond at any point of time. If you respond, you're actually jumping into the muck. You understand? But if you relate with it directly or indirectly, then get in touch with that person. That is better. But nothing on social media.
Paarul, your views on this?
Yes, so I have slightly different view on this, because I think the problem is that you cannot ignore the person. You have to engage with them. At some point, you have to end up engaging with them because they are part of your stakeholders.
Correct.
So that is the biggest issue. I see several problems on both sides. I'll start off with the naming and shaming thing. See, the naming and shaming, we all know the heart of the problem is poorly done media pitches and incessant calling by PR professionals, not updating their list. That is the homework which PR professionals should be doing. So even if you address one person like a monstrous hydra, 10 other pop up because you haven't addressed the core issue of pitching the right story. Not calling. Sometimes I get calls. I would say 80% of my calls from PR professionals is that what story can you do? Now it's not my job to tell you what story I can do on for you. You have to tell me, but they are unable to tell me. That to me is a huge failure. If you don't want to be taken as a call center thing, then you improve the quality of your pitch. What John said about maintaining relationship is very important, because comment on the story of the journalist, build up a relationship with them before that, give some insights, give information not related to your client, give some feedback, post some articles, tag them. Then you build up. When you have that kind of thing, and the person also knows that you are actually a source of good information and not a source of only, not just a conveyor of information about a client, it changes the relationship in a very big way. Secondly, I would say that this is the age of Insta complaints. It started off with customer care, and now journalists are behaving in the same way. You just have an Insta complaint, and you say what you feel like, and you're powerful, so you actually behave like an asshole, to be very honest. So I am very much against naming and shaming PR or anybody for that matter, and I do think that PR professionals should take it up. If it is your mistake, admit it and give steps. If it is not your mistake, tweet something from your handle explaining what happened. Do it once and then close it. I would even say that you should escalate it to the person's boss. Write an email and to the person, you said this and this is what, one should do it, start doing it, because unless you push back, it's not really going to happen. And then the anger will burst one day and somebody will say something, a PR person will say something, which I have to say that PR professionals are extremely patient with the kind of abuse, and I would say it's abuse they face. They are really, really patient, I must say. But please understand that a journalist is not, at the heart of it is a lack of understanding of what a journalist's role also is. It's not a journalist's role to do your story. So once you understand this, you will be able to work on your editorial points. Last thing is there that in extreme cases, I am in favor of brands blacklisting journalists. I'm being very blunt about it. You should actually blacklist those people and say, we will not give you stories. And it works very fast with journalists, believe me. A journalist who will not touch your story will react the opposite way the moment you say, you can't do this story. We're not giving you this story. So in extreme cases, you should also do that. Yeah.
No, I completely agree on that. It's your client and you need to be a team. Worst case scenarios happen when a journalist complains and the client drops you like a hot potato. Yeah. And further demotivates that agency or the PR professional who's working on your account. As a team, the client and the agency need to work together to make sure what works for the entire ecosystem as such, right? So I want to pose this question to both of you. Can EQ be cultivated in an organization? Can EQ be learned? And what should leadership teams do in PR agencies to make sure that this is a culture that permeates, throughout?
Yes, if you really ask this question, EQ can be learned. Yes, we all learn this. We are not born with this, right? Some of those things we learn from our parents. Some of those things we learn from our teachers. Some of those things we learn from our leaders and how they manage, how they work, how they deal with. And these emotions, when we're talking about emotions, and you said no, sometimes actually the agencies or the companies leave the agencies like a hot potato. I have seen some of the agencies leaving that not because of the money, not because of the work. It's because they both are not on the same page of their emotions, right? And they don't understand. They feel that you're not doing enough, or you're not able to convey them. We are doing, but you have expectation which is too beyond. When if they are actually come on the both on the same page, and I don't think people can actually work for very long. That's exactly what happens with the big your industry leaders, the top 5, top 10 companies, and they do work like that. And the second part comes here is learning purpose. When you see your bosses having that emotions and dealing with that emotions, not hiding them, not or running away from them, not neglecting them, not telling you it's okay, chinta mat karo, aage badho, don't even give importance to. If they don't do that, okay, sit down. Okay, what is that? It's hurting you. What is that? What is the mistake you're done? What is the good thing you're done? If you actually have these conversations and probably a little bit of training in understanding their own emotions, how because the person might be hardworking, the person might have certain kind of sensitive issues in their life. Because the sensitive issues, if anything comes and hits that, they can break down. But here in front of the colleagues, you can't cry, you can't show your weakness. So you have to show. In the process of showing, you're actually giving a different persona to people, and under up gal rahe ho, under up pareshan ho rahe ho. If you actually help them to understand their emotions through some training programs, and also how to express, how to understand, how to express their emotions to other people, how to understand other people's emotions accurately, and how to manage that. If you actually give them training, I'm 100% sure they'll all can learn very well, and they can use that knowledge in terms of handling their emotions and people's emotions very well. And that can.
I think this I think this could be a good session when somebody does an induction program. I think EQ is one of the things that need to be put in. Paarul, your views on this?
I think John is very right. Definitely EQ can be taught, but finally the EQ has to come from the leadership. That is, like a given. Unless the leadership demonstrates it and supports their staff, you will not be able to really implement it as a system to the organization. And here I'd really like to praise and call out Genesis BCW. The way their leadership supports their staff, they walk away from clients. I know this. If the staff is not being treated well, from big clients, mind you, and so really, they are the professionals. They are confident of the support they get. So that kind of confidence is required. That tomorrow, if I don't want to work with someone, for whatever reasons, person is being abusive, then and clients, I've seen clients also can be extremely abusive. So then it's up to the leadership to step in and say, sorry, this is not something we entertain, and we don't entertain clients like that. That's the only way I can see it sort of being implemented in a practical way.
Correct. Completely understand. And I must say that's something that I've learned from them as well. And I've implemented in my agency as well. We walk away from clients or from journalists, and we're not averse to blacklisting both of them for being abusive.
But here, there's something interesting actually I noticed right now. How much you guys need the companies.
Yes.
And they need the same amount of you guys as well. But what is that makes these PR companies so vulnerable to succumb to the pressure of their demands? I don't know. Probably you guys need to look at that. The over, promising and under delivering, you're making an unhappy client.
Correct.
But promising accurately and delivering accurately, you can make more happy clients. I don't know. Probably you guys might think about that.
I think
Sorry.
It also depends on the profit levels that the company wants to maintain, one. And second, the sensitivity or the EQ of the leadership team. Do they view their workforce as hands and legs to deliver profit? Okay. Or do they actually want to create a reputation within the reputation industry who will look at creating a band of happy clients? I think that's where the crux of the matter lies. Paarul, views.
Yeah, I'd like to add 2 points here. One is that you mentioned earlier about clients, saying that let's not offend a journalist, or they complain, the journalist will complain directly. So a journalist's effort will always be to go to the main source of the story, which in this case would be the client. So that is a journalist's job. But you have to educate your client that, look, if you keep giving direct access, you will have no buffer. And especially in a crisis, you will not be able to split the two and offer another point of view. And you will be startled by the journalist calling you, and you may blurt out something which is not should be said. So I think that is something which the client should be educated about, that what is the role of PR. It's not just handing over the press release. It's being the first gatekeeper of the information, and in some cases the final gatekeeper. And it's to their advantage to have this buffer. The second thing which I have noticed is that, which I want to say, is that PR is often said कि वो PR कर रही है, या that is a PR stunt or whatever. It's derogatory way of. But PR is at the heart of being human. I mean, right now even I am doing my PR by talking to all of you. John is doing some PR. Tarun is doing some PR. Your dog sitting there is doing his own PR that you better give me my biscuit and food. So there is no human being who is devoid of PR. So why this, sort of animosity? I would say embrace PR. Be happy to be sort of PR professionals, because you can't be human without doing someone. The moment you express that this is my name, you're doing PR. So
isn't it ironic that PR themselves, the entire community, needs a lot of PR for itself? And this is a reputation management that we're not been able to solve for the entire community. Yeah, but I do believe there's a lot
I think
of
it's what John said, that why is there so much insecurity? I think it's worth exploring.
While there is a lot of
exploring.
Other verticals in communication, I think that is where PR agencies or PR professionals have been working in silos. And with PRPOI, that is one of the intentions that we want to kind of create. We want to create a camaraderie within the PR community. End of the day, it's okay. There is enough business for everyone. You don't really have to be that cut.
You guys have more business than what you can actually expect. But the problem, everybody wants to get only that.
There is more than enough business for
what is not visible is so much everywhere. But you need to have innovative ways of reaching out to those areas as well.
Correct. And there has to be a certain amount of camaraderie out there for people to be able to encourage them also, other young professionals also, to join the industry, because what gets shown out there is not the exact true picture of what is happening. And people like Paarul, who are now writing about PR and talking about it, I think there is a lot of myth busting that is happening out there. A lot of communication. The more communication that goes out on PR, the more easier it is for people to understand and get a true picture of it. Paarul, we have one question directly addressed to you. Since you are also a part of, a lot of the communication courses, what, according to you, should institutions be doing when they think of adding EQ as part of their curriculum?
So, one, I think it should be actually formally taught. The psychology of communication should be formally taught at organizations like IMC. There is actually the psychology of selling also, which should be formally taught, marketing and selling. There are people who specialize in consumer psychology. So that is something which can be learned and taught. And in that, you can figure out EQ. The second, there should be actually a paper on that. It should be a given. For example, when I did my psychology honors, we had to do a paper on sociology plus data science. So it was not enough to just do psychology. You had to do like a data paper, a paper on statistics as well as a paper on sociology. So the whole
Right.
ecosystem has to be taken into account. And to me, it's extremely surprising that a very important ecosystem like your emotions, which are so central to you, are never considered. You are supposed to deliver ignoring emotions. So which is quite a ridiculous kind of thing. So IMCs of the world, all the Sophia colleges, all the XLRI, the Xavier Institutes, they should all actually institutionalize relationship management, I would say. Apart from psychology of selling and consumer side, relationship management.
Right.
And of course, like you had said, that they should be in the induction program. You should bring in a clinical psychologist and have a workshop for them. Let them learn it. Through in a structured way through the year, in regular ways. And a lot of firms like Ad Factors in the current scenario have counselors on call. There is Yellow Seed Communication Ad Factors. They have counselors on call. So I think that's something worth considering.
Well, that's brilliant. Interestingly, we have a counselor on board as well, where people can reach out and speak to her as and when they like, if they're facing an issue. I think it's a very good practice. It brings in a lot of relief, for people who are struggling. But it's interesting when you point that out, like when we are taught management, when we are taught communication, and when we enter the industry, there is a huge disconnect because that entire chapter on relationships and emotions is missing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they expect you to handle very complex relationships from day one without being trained in it. So that is a big miss.
John, your views on this?
What you said is absolutely right. But the problem is, we do not actually invest into that, something like that. We think that, hey, this is normal. I mean, you're managing your relationship with your mom, dad, and everybody around. You have multiple relationships. What is the big deal? You can handle anything. But it's not true. Handling emotions and people and relationships, you need to understand yourself. If you really look at that, if you ask anybody in the industry or outside, tell me about yourself. Who are you? 90% of the people find it very difficulty. They'll wait. Their minds goes into the blank and think about what should I speak. Anybody who understands about themselves, they understand the world very well. So this particular training of emotional intelligence or complex relationships, understand the integration with the world, these are all things actually by default we think we learn everything, but no, we have to when somebody has to teach us to. I'll just ask you a simple thing. What do you think about objectivity? And many people read and give good definition, but they don't really practice that. How to practice if they know 99% of problems they will not encounter because they see everything objective and they will not allow their emotions to involve into that. So somebody has to train them how to understand emotions, how to read the signal, how to understand and read the signals of other people, how to manage them, how to regulate those things. Somebody who is trained into that, if they actually can take few hours of training, probably once in a month time, probably within that time, people can learn things and they can actually handle themselves much better. That's exactly what we do in our therapy. We train our clients in terms of understanding themselves, understanding their emotions, regulate their emotions. In turn, we encourage them to do the same thing with people outside.
Right.
Then, when they become complete individuals, then the problems what they're facing, they will not encounter the same problems again. They'll be able to handle them better.
Right.
So it's important and mandatory to have this particular course, not for PR professionals, but for everybody, whoever is going through college education.
That's very interesting. I do hope that that happens. I remember when I did my course in NLP, that was one of the fields that I also felt should be mandatory in a lot of colleges. Because again, it deals with relationships. If I'm not taught psychology in depth, maybe that might not be everybody's cup of tea. But dealing with emotions as such, or dealing with how to manage relationships irrespective of whether you join PR, advertising, digital, or whichever field of communication or marketing for that matter, is something that needs to be, handheld at some point or the other. Yeah, great. So we are running out of time. I would like to wrap it up by asking each one of you to help me, give the entire PR community 3 things that you want them to take from this session. Paarul, we'll start with you.
Okay. So I would, so 3 things I would say is that push back with the journalist, but push back with data, with evidence, with sense, and get your pitches right.
Right.
Secondly, I would say stand up for yourself, like John had said, explore yourself further. Try and understand why we as Indians find it so difficult to say no. Why do we find it so difficult to say no?
Right.
Thirdly, I would say that invest in enjoying yourself. That I would, invest in enjoying yourself, taking a break. It's not the end of the world if the story doesn't come.
Awesome. John?
So first, prioritize yourself. If you're not there, whatever you're doing is just useless. It doesn't really make any sense. So you should be the center of everything what you're doing. So it is work, relationships, or anything. So prioritize yourself. That's the first thing. Second one is understand. Understanding not just your emotions, but also other people as well. And understand to a level where you can actually start to see things which people are not actually telling you directly with the words, but you're picking up from them, but accurately. And third one is learning. Learning something is very important because we think that, okay, I learn everything, I understand everything. No. What is you're actually learning from the internet right now on the social media is half of that is completely fake and without facts. As a psychologist, but a psychologist doesn't say things like that. You need to have a lot of material behind that to prove research behind that to tell, okay, this is going to work. So try to reach out to the places where you can actually accurately learn, so that not only helps you to live a better life, but also help other people around you to have a better life as well. Because if you are stable and sensible, and people around you become more stable and sensible as well. If you're unstable, you're actually making other people feel unstable as well, right? Prioritize, right? And second one is understanding. Third one is learning. Probably that's what I feel you should actually concentrate on.
Brilliant. This was a very interesting session, and I wish we had 1 more hour to answer a lot of the questions that are pouring in. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. I will request either Paarul or you to, look at all the questions after the session in the comment section and see if we can respond to that. And on that note, would like to thank both of you. Thank you so much for, being a part of our session today and taking out the time to speak to the entire PR community. I'm sure a lot of them will benefit greatly from the advice that you've given today. Thank you so much.
Right.
Thank you so much. Good wishes for a great weekend. Thank you, Taran. Thank you, John.
Everybody who is listening to this, and I really appreciate everybody to be emotionally stable and make your life more beautiful.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that was Paarul Chand and Dr. John Victor speaking to us about developing emotional quotient in PR. I hope this session will help you understand more about the sector and add the learnings to your PR campaigns. Thank you for joining us today. And of course, a big shout out to our PR partners, PR Moment, for supporting us. So that's all from us today on PRPOI. We will see you next Saturday for another interesting session from a different vertical of PR. See you then.